Well, hello, and thank you for joining us today. We're thrilled to have you here as we dive into some very timely and important topics. My name is Greg Reeder. I'm the Senior Director of Defense Strategy here at Skydio. I'll be your host for today's discussion, guiding you through what promises to be a very insightful and engaging session. So, today we're going to discuss how Skydio supports Allied Defense Forces. Our speakers will cover a bit about autonomous drones used in supporting ground and maritime forces, coastal defense, and reconnaissance. We're also going to talk a little bit about Skydio's use in commercial operations and how those innovations are being used today to support defense forces in Ukraine, as well as other applications. Our goal is to shed light on how aerial robots and autonomy are being deployed globally and how they're shaping the future of defense. So we've got a great team to talk to you about those things. So today, for our speakers, I'm honored to introduce the distinguished speakers we have on hand, which begins with Justin Jordan. He's the VP of Federal Sales, Defense and Critical Infrastructure at Skydio. We have Udit Patel. He's the Program Manager for International, Asia Pacific, and the United States Air Force at Skydio. We have Keith Thomas, Uncrewed Aerial Systems Capability Lead at EPE, Trusted to Protect, and Rob Eddy, Group Chief Operating Officer at EPE, Trusted to Protect. So each of our speakers brings a wealth of experience, a wealth of knowledge to the table, and we're excited to hear what they have to say about these crucial topics today. So to kick it off, I'm going to turn it over to Justin. We're going to start with you and see if you could share a little bit about how Skydio leverages our use cases to support the global defense and the military.
Yeah, hi, Greg. Skydio looks at it as being a holistic approach to being able to provide smart autonomous drones that reduce the cognitive load for all of our warfighters and operators that are out there executing missions. Specifically, we got our start in the ISR, intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance mission, supporting real-time decision-making in extremely complex environments. But what we've also done is we've expanded that out, right? So we have some more non-traditional use cases. When you talk about being able to inspect assets and vessels, that really comes into the maritime setting that we're doing with some navies around the world to be able to also provide surveillance operations, but also maintenance and support operations, being able to help do condition-based maintenance through naval vessels stationed all over the world. We've got some things that we're doing right now currently with different departments in the Department of Defense, with the Air Force and the Navy respectively, and also the Canadian Navy. And these are things that we're really excited to potentially bring to the region here through EPE. And then also when you look at kind of Navy and then you take it into those coastal regions, Skydio drones assist in monitoring, securing kind of critical areas, providing valuable intelligence for both defense and humanitarian type of operations, to include also search and rescue. And then we also, we're an aerial-based drone, so we operate kind of in the air, and we enhance force projection by providing high-resolution aerial imagery and real-time data to command centers around the world through integrated operations, so that we help the commanders have the best pictures so they can make strategic and tactical decisions when they need to. And being able to leverage smart and autonomous sensors, we think, is the way of the future, and one way that is going to empower our forces and our allies in this fight and the next. And we're doing it through essentially a COTS product, but it's not just COTS, right? It's a trusted and secure product through evaluation, through our secure supply chain. So when you look at what we're doing, it's all NDA compliant, so National Defense Authorization Act. So the pieces and parts have all been verified by the Department of Defense, so that they are built to operate in extreme environments, whether that be weather or enemy extremes, through like EW or contested environments where we need to be able to ensure high reliability in very difficult situations. And the platforms that we're talking, we have a dual use capability where we have platforms that service the state and local markets as well as the commercial market, but we also have platforms that are specifically purpose-built for defense and MOD type customers, so that they know that they're trusted and secure when they're taking them out to operate on the edge, and a capability to operate in contested airspace anywhere that the units would deploy around the world. And to talk a little bit more specifically about what we're doing in the region, I'm going to turn it over to Udit right now, and he'll give you a little bit more detail on what we're doing to customers in the region.
Thanks, Justin. Thanks for the intro. And so Skydio drones have active use cases all over AUKUS. So when I say AUKUS, Australia, UK, and the US for all our partners, and we're ensuring that we have interoperability between our platforms for all the forces that are using them. This means they could be used in joint exercises. They could operate them together with similar equipment, which means they could have similar TTPs, which are tactics, techniques, and procedures, and they could deploy them in similar ways throughout the world. And also how to use the controls and where they'll operate them as well. But I'd also like to ask Keith, how do you see Skydio drones being used in Australia and New Zealand?
Yeah, sure. So at the moment, we are seeing an uptake in the purchase of Skydio drones by our by military as well as our public safety agencies. We've seen interoperability between the US, the UK, and Australia on exercises here using Skydio drones, and I think it's really, really important in aligning those the equipment that we're using with our partners to make sure that our defence forces can surge capability and interoperate with each other's equipment. It also adds to the ability for us to use each other's equipment and the supply chain. So with supply chain being on a remote island here in Australia and also in our region, it's a very remote location. So having a very secure supply chain and other partners that you can lean on to be able to gather equipment is very, very important for this region.
Yeah, thank you for talking about secure supply chain, because I'd like to give a little bit more insight into that. So our manufacturing capacities, we have a large scale production area, which are secure supply chain, as Justin mentioned. We are NDA compliant, which means all our parts we know exactly where all the parts are coming from, and we've tested them by itself, and then of course holistically as well. And we offer an end-to-end solution from development and we're ensuring that all the components meet the stringent military standards that exist right now. But not only do we have a secure supply chain, but we also have a robust end-to-end security posture. And our security posture right now is also being tested in Ukraine, which I'll send it off to Justin. Justin, can you give us a little bit more how we're using this in Ukraine?
Yeah, absolutely. Skydio has been involved in the Ukraine support effort really since the conflict kicked off, right? And we've had drones on the ground, and it's been a great learning laboratory for us as we've gone over there and been able to support the Ukrainians in their fight to maintain independence. And what we've learned is how to make our systems more resilient and be able to provide value to those people on the front lines. And it's a little bit of a cat and mouse game. As we come up with ideas, they come up with ideas. But some things that we're being able to do to support the forces on the ground were used in critical intelligence gathering, because Skydio is unique with our autonomy engine and being able to use visual navigation. We can go in places where GPS is jammed, where we're not relying on GPS. We can go in those places at night now that we've come out with new features and capabilities that allow us to leverage our obstacle avoidance at that night. And it allows the data to be able to come back and return. And we're getting more sorties than any other Group 1 system over there. And we're really giving the Ukrainians a very good return on their investment, And as I mentioned too, we've done some things that have made it more robust from an EW or an electronic warfare capability that allows us to understand what the enemy's doing, and the drone can automatically or autonomously select the areas that allow it to maintain command and control so that it can execute missions depending on what the mission profile is. And we're also, not only are we in the kinetic fight, we're in the humanitarian fight too, because we're being able to document war crimes through the Office of the Prosecutor General by ways that the Russians have launched attacks and done different things to damage of infrastructure. And we've actually had a couple of prosecutions that have used images and models that were built by Skydio drones, flown by lawyers that were actually used in cases to help convict Russians for the crimes. Now, as we're talking about what we can do in the region, I'm talking here. I'd love to pass it off to Rob to talk a little bit more about how we fit in with EPE and how the EPE Skydio team can help the customers in the region.
Yeah, thanks, Justin. Hello, everybody. I think from my perspective, I'd like to start with the sort of unique position and the unique geography of Australia. It's been front and center, of the thought process, certainly from a defence perspective here, as we've been through a defence review over the last couple of years, looking at Australia's position and how we counter some of the threats in the region that we're in. Australia's moving towards a strategy of denial, which sees them project force out to try and the adversary's sort of incursion into the region, and the challenge of people and the resourcing to be able to do so. So force multipliers such as the Skydio drone allows us to really enhance the capability that we can offer into defence, so that they can undertake the missions and tasks that they have, using some of the technologies to enable them to do so. So I think that's a really important part, and we're seeing a lot more interest in the defence area, and Keith will talk about that in a little bit more detail. I think from an Australian context, I've mentioned the geography. Australia's obviously got a huge coastline and a lot of empty space. It's quite a unique geography. So again, the technologies such as the Skydio drones can really supplement the small population and act as that force multiplier that I've meant, not only in defence, but also in terms of border protection. We've got a lot of well-publicised issues in terms of trying to control migration into the country. It's a large and remote coastline. So we're seeing the Skydios being used within other Australian government departments to try and monitor those coastlines where we can't get a lot of people in to do the job, because it's difficult geographically, and it's difficult in terms of the resource bill. I think another point that I'd make there is the utility of the dock in enabling that, because you can then sustain some of those more remote operations, providing that persistent capability, which is a real bonus out here. Again, from the resource perspective. From the more regional perspective, I've touched on it from a defence point of view. We're seeing a lot of those challenges also. The ones that we are seeing in Australia mirrored across the Indo-Pacific region, and that's necessitating some of that more advanced technology to counter those regional adversaries. The ability to use the technologies like the Skydio are really important to try and support our allies and provide us with the support and the intelligence gathering that's important to build the intelligence picture of what's going on. We're seeing a lot of use outside of defence also in the region. Police forces, border forces, emergency services. A good example, again, for the capability of the drones to cover large areas is in the against the bushfire risk that we face over here. Australia has a well-documented incidents of fires. We had some pretty serious ones a couple of years ago. Being able to use the technologies to cover huge areas and provide that important intelligence back is, again, another really important use case that we're seeing a lot of interest in. We at EPE recently hosted a scenario and a demonstration for the Air Services group, their firefighting resources over here. They came and trialed some scenarios and really saw the utility of those platforms to enable them to provide early warning and really focus their response if there were incidents, in this particular instance, such as fire. So a huge spectrum of uses that really fit into the Australian geography and the Australian perspective, but also the wider Indo-Pacific challenges that we're seeing over here. I'm just going to hand across to Keith now just to talk a little bit more in detail about some of the other ones and particularly focus in on some more specifics around the opportunities that we're seeing in defence.
Yeah, sure. So I think Rob's touched pretty well on defence and also law enforcement there. The other space that we're seeing drones used a lot more in this country and across the region now is in critical infrastructure inspection. So using drones to go through and create models, build historical data of infrastructure. We're noticing now that a lot of people are requesting the use of a allied procured drone as opposed to something from an unknown nation. So that's been an interesting change probably over the last 6 to 12 months that we're seeing here. There's a lot of obviously opportunities within the Defence Force. The integrated investment plan that was released, it was about 12 months ago now. They've indicated that there's several hundreds of millions of dollars to be spent on different uncrewed systems over the next sort of decade. So we definitely know that we're going to be using a lot more uncrewed systems to supplement our lack of people, which is a big problem that we have here considering the size of our country and also across the region as well. And we're already seeing the Defence Force looking at different types of platforms that they can use for this use case, and they're doing a lot of different evaluation programs at the moment to try to figure out exactly what the best product is going to be. And pretty well, Skydio drones have been involved in all of those different evaluations. Across the rest of the Australian government, there is a large multitude of different government organisations that are currently going through the same process that our Defence Force and our police forces are going through, where we no longer want to use uncrewed systems from those unknown nations. We want to use them from our allied partners. So anything that's manufactured in the US or the UK, or obviously in Australia, is a big tick in the box for us. And then we're also seeing that happen not just in Australia, but also, once again, our regional partners, which is probably a good segue in to talk about a little bit more about New Zealand and the network-enabled army there. Would you want to talk about
that?
Yeah,
sure. I can cover across that. So EP was recently awarded a contract by the New Zealand Ministry of Defence to supply them and their Defence Force as part of the reconnaissance and surveillance program that they're doing, the Network-Enabled Army program. They took up just over 20, I believe, Skydio drones, which we supplied in. And really, they're looking to sort of elevate their ability to provide situational awareness, support the deployed command decision-making across the echelons of command, but also enhance their, the critical battlefield missions, the surveillance capability, and provide some accurate capture of mapping data. I think, for them, it was important that they could increase the safety and security of their own forces and personnel, but also use these to try and assist, as has been touched on, during some humanitarian assistance, disaster relief type scenarios, not only in combat and search and rescue operations. Again, there's some interesting geographies in the region. New Zealand's prone to earthquakes and cyclones, so this again is an asset that they've now got in their armory to be able to provide that surveillance capability and really enhance the decision-making capabilities that they have within the C2 structure of their armed forces. So a really good example, and we'll see, I'm sure, those drones starting to get more operational use as they get familiar. We've provided the introduction into service, the evaluation and training over the course of the last few months. So as those drones start to get more operational use, we should see them appearing and really showing their value, showcasing their value over the next period of few years. I'd like to just move on and just talk about the support that we provide in region through the EPE maintenance hub and the model that we have here to support the Skydio products. So we have a model where we look to support all the capabilities that we put in to the end users. And the advantages of that are twofold, really. They allow us to reduce costs in terms of sending equipment back to you guys in the States. Obviously, we take out the freight costing and all that sort of stuff if we're able to do some of the maintenance here in country. But also, more importantly, it allows that asset to reduce the time that it's non-operational. So if end users don't have it, they aren't able to perform those operational missions. If we can turn that around quicker by being in region or providing forward deployed assets, then obviously we reduce the time that they're offline. So there's some real advantages to be able to maintain to a level in country. And our model is we maintain a group of technicians here in country. We've sent them over to you guys to get trained up on some of the equipment to varying levels. They get certified to be able to do some of the fixes, and then we do that in country. Or we provide a deployable capability whereby those guys can go forward and fix the capabilities in country. And we've recently done that out into the Middle East with a group that's gone out there to maintain some electronic countermeasures equipment, and routinely provide that facility and service for the Foreign Affairs organization over here. So I think our ability to perform repairs here and forward allows that uninterruption, as I've talked about, and even in conflict situations, we'd have teams that could go forward and do that, or provide that short lead time to send it here and allow it to do the repairs in country. We're looking to set up some regional hubs as well. We're expanding a lot of our other business into Southeast Asia. We've got a sizable amount of capability now flowing into Indonesia. So again, we're looking to forward base and provide them with the best options for repair to allow maintenance and continual use of those capabilities as we move forward. So hopefully that capability that we have and develop here will be a real asset to maintaining the Skydio equipment in theatre and increasing the time on task, if you like, for those bits of kit.
Maybe I'll turn it back over to you, Justin. Is there to kind of close out that topic and how Skydio works along with what Rob had just mentioned from an international perspective? How are we supporting other allied nations? And then I think we'll wrap it up. We're near time, and we've got a few questions to respond to as well as we get towards the end.
We're supporting and we have drones deployed all across the Five Eye countries, and we seek out partners in those areas very similar to EPE, because as we're going into a lot of these other regions, we want to make sure that we are aligned with the best partner in the region that understands the space, understands the customer's needs, but also understands how Skydio can help bridge some of those gaps and be the solution for them. So we were excited as we're coming to market in the region with EPE and what we as a collective group can provide to the end users to help them do things better and safer and more efficient in their daily tasks.
Okay. Well, this has been a good discussion, and you guys aren't off the hook yet. We've got a few questions that have come in. And so they relate to a lot of what you've talked about already. So I'm going to frame them, and I'll tell you what the question was that the folks asked. But we've got a pretty good grouping of the things that you've discussed, and we're going to drill down a little bit more. And so the first one is for you, Justin, but of course anybody else can chime in. I was talking with someone the other day that asked a question about the Skydio drones and its ability to have obstacle avoidance, and they wanted to know specifically if they could take it to explore a cave, right? So there's no GPS. There's a lot of obvious challenges with that. And so the question that came in pretty much relates to that. And they ask, how do Skydio drones actually adapt to different operational environments? Like Rob talked about fighting fires and open coastlines, and we're talking about defense operations and interoperability. So how can Skydio as an ecosystem, or even a drone, like adapt to all those different land, sea, and air missions and environments?
Well, that's
for Justin.
Is it because it's a smart drone, right? So it's running 9 neural networks on a CPU processor on the drone, and then there's 6 cameras, obstacle avoidance cameras, that are feeding into those networks that allow the drone to see, understand, and act on things that are happening in its environment. So you don't necessarily need to preload maps. It's going to be able to operate off of vision. And then now we've added what we call night sense. So it's the capability with IR lighting to illuminate the area as the drone flies at night. So it has the same level of obstacle avoidance during the day or pitch black darkness. We've executed this in a couple of different ways, right? New York City, we've gone in and helped them explore subway tunnels that were out of use and help them map some of those. We've gone into places with wildfires and on the edges and around as they're going on with some international partners, specifically down in Colombia. And it's also IP rated, so you can take it and you can get it wet. You don't need to keep it dry and out of harm's way. And it understands the mission that it needs to execute, and it's going to go execute the mission. So rather than having somebody working the sensor flying the drone, the operator just needs to focus on what they want to capture, and then the drone will get it there in the best way possible, avoiding any and all obstacles and giving you a very high resolution based on the sensor payload that's currently on the drone, and it is best in class of a drone this size. So it really offers a lot of capability in a very small package for users that are wanting to bring small UAS into their operational schema, whether that's in a dynamic and kinetic environment like military, or you're looking at, land management and wildfire type of mitigation type operations, or if you need to go in caves and you're looking for mining specific operations.
Yeah. Well, that's interesting because I guess the flip side, and we've talked a lot about defense forces and allied defense forces and Ukraine. One of the big obvious topics is EMI, electromagnetic interference, and electronic warfare. You kind of touched on that in the beginning to the extent possible without revealing any secrets. Can you explain a little bit about how Skydio and EP and other forces can work together with this platform to kind of counter what they're up against when it comes to modern warfare, when RF environments?
Correct. Yeah. Sure. Like I said before, Ukraine's currently right now the ultimate testbed environment because it's the most dynamic that's going on really around the world, where you've got two countries that are going at each other, and there's fairly sophisticated technology being employed from a jamming and an EW scenario, right? So understanding that environment and being able to find areas in the environment that you can operate has been key for both sides. And as tactics, techniques, and procedures evolve and change over time, you need a system that's going to evolve and change with it. So what we've done at Skydio, through a lot of trial and error and working with our partners on the ground in Ukraine, is build a platform that can operate on multiple frequencies that give you a broadband that you can, find clean spectrum in order to be able to execute the mission. It also, with those 9 neural networks, it's able to see and understand its environment. So if you have RF interference and you have loss of GPS, it sees and understands the environment that it's flying in and has the ability to execute the mission and also return to home so that you can retrieve the data. And then it's doing it through a very secure connection. So it's going to be very hard for the enemy to understand exactly where you are. And we've done some things with our antenna schema and how we're employing those to provide further support for our users to be able to have the capability to project signal from different sources that allow the drone to execute the mission.
Okay. Well, maybe switching gears a little bit, we've talked about the capabilities. The questions came in a little bit about EW. The other one, Keith and Rob, you both mentioned about being able to have reliable drones from known suppliers. And Udi, you talked a little bit about supply chain. Maybe could we pull the thread a little bit? We had a question about how do we make sure that we have a secure supply chain? Like how can that be guaranteed so that we can support everybody with a safe and secure and a known entity when it comes to how we produce drones?
Sure. Thanks for the question, Greg. we know where each of our parts and each of our components come from, down to which country they're coming from. So all these supply chains we should make sure they're reliable and they're high quality, and they're of course tested before they're put on our platform. So they're individually tested, get the test reports, and before we even put them on our platform, even before they're produced. Of course, we also follow the U.S. government and regulatory agency security requirements that are out there. Like make sure we're following all NDA compliance and making sure we get the components from a truthful source as well. And while we're talking about components, the security side is important as well. And we have strong encryption, and the cybersecurity of our systems is strong as well. So all your information is being stored appropriately as well during transit and at rest.
Okay. So we've covered capabilities. We've covered how they're built. Some of the other things, Rob, you brought up about coastlines and wildfires. Keith, you talked about support for basing and in Ukraine and even humanitarian assistance and disaster recovery. I thought maybe I'd turn it over to you, gents, to talk a little bit. Maybe there's some specific stories, or drill down a little bit into how you're really employing that, because it seems like it's the answer to everything, which we want people to think, but it really does have a lot of applications across many different capabilities, and helping people is a great way to be able to use technology. And maybe explain a little bit of how it's being used for humanitarian assistance and maybe some of that regional effort that you talked about earlier.
Yeah, so I'll start off. I think, from our perspective here in Australia and the sort of wider Pacific region, I think there's probably four things that I'd just sort of focus in on. The first is that that force multiplier effect that I talked about earlier. The capabilities that we've heard a little bit about on this session today really do allow the kit to perform tasks that allow you to reduce the numbers of people. So in Australia is a case where areas are vast and people resources are small. The ability to use the capabilities of the Skydio to enhance what you're seeing, what the picture is, enhance that data flow back, so accurate decisions can be made, be they in a fire scenario or a border protection scenario or a defense scenario, is really important. And I think the breadth of utility that we've seen here again is something that is key. The capabilities and the information is first class, so that can really inform getting the accurate decision from people, and therefore deploying the right resources into the right place to come out with the right outcome. So the first point is that that force multiplier effect, and the second one I've touched on is the quality of the information and the data. The feeds are providing information that's reliable and clear, so it reduces the uncertainty around some of the decisions, and the ability to deploy it into those environments is key. The third bit I'd touch on is the usability. We're finding a lot of feedback here is that it's very easy for guys in the field, be they border protection people or first responders to incidents or soldiers on the ground. The equipment is user friendly. It's easy to use. The training burden is not enormous by any means. So we can quickly get these into operational roles. And you've got a broad spectrum of people that can use it. It doesn't necessarily have to be a specialist. You can use it in all different areas to enhance the mission that you're trying to achieve. So I think that's key. And the final one is we touched on the supportability. The model where you can have an EPE supporting the maintenance and the through life support, reducing any gaps in the operational capability or the operational ability of that particular drone, and the ability to forward deploy and maintain the capability in region where it's being used is also fundamental, particularly when you might have a whole series of these deployed across the Pacific or the archipelagic region that we have here. So the ability to do those four things, I think, are really impressive and are what make the technology stand out.
Okay. Well, I thank you. And I also thank you for using archipelagic, because I I'm surprised I could even say it, but no, I'm glad for the great expertise that everybody was able to share with us today. Lots of great information, and grateful for your partnership and being able to help people find new ways to tackle complex problems. Before we go, for those of you that are attending land forces, we'd love to continue the conversation with you in person. So you can meet our team at EPE Trusted Protect Stand. It's booth G070, and it's on 11 to 13 September. We look forward to seeing you there and talking more in depth about what we can offer and what we can help you solve. With that, well, thank you for your time and your expertise, and thank the audience for attending and joining us today to hear more about what Skydio and EPE have to offer.
Pleasure. Thanks for having us.
Thank you very much.